Google violated national labor laws by firing a man for voicing his concerns regarding the workplace environment. A Google employee released a memo a few days ago pointing out the intolerance of ideological diversity within Google and how it stifles certain speech. This creates a hostile work environment for the employees that are too afraid of speaking out and saying anything that might be interpreted by someone as being problematic. After the memo went viral throughout social media, people were divided into two sides mostly. One side demanding that the man who sent that memo be fired for sending out such misogynistic hate speech, and the other side patiently waiting for this man to be inevitably fired by the hands of the toddler at the helm of the company that is Google. Imagine the surprise to no one when this man would be fired from Google for his suggestions to improve working conditions. Outrage and celebrations ran out through social media, but most people overlooked a detail which is important. Under the National Labor Relations Act, employees are protected federally to bargain collectively through representatives of employees' own choosing for a contract with your employer, setting your wages, benefits, hours, and other working conditions, among other things. In fact, any company that isn't hooked up to, say, some sort of union is protected by the National Labor Relations Act. So this employee has all of the rights listed in the image that you see before you. Google's ideological echo chamber, how biased clouds are thinking about diversity and inclusion. He writes a pretty decent summary here. And if you want me to take a look at the full, Google's political bias has equated the freedom from offense with psychological safety, but shaming into silence is the antithesis of psychological safety. The silencing has created an ideological echo chamber where some ideas are too sacred to be honestly discussed. The lack of discussion fosters the most extreme and authoritarian elements of the following. Extreme: all disparities in representation are due to oppression. Authoritarian: we should discriminate to correct this oppression. Differences in distributions of traits between men and women may in part explain why we don't have 50% representation of women in tech and leadership. Discrimination to reach equal representation is unfair, divisive, and bad for business. So, of course, this is a very hateful statement to make, as you can tell. First, the irony is not lost on me. A man makes a claim that, oh, well, there's a bit of a political bias here. Some people are too afraid to speak out. And then that man gets fired, therefore proving the exact point he was making. This next part is from a CNBC article. First, federal labor law bars even non-union employers like Google from punishing an employee for communicating with fellow employees about improving working conditions. The purpose of the memo was to persuade Google to abandon certain diversity-related practices the engineer found objectionable, and to convince coworkers to join his cause or at least discuss the points he raised. Second, the engineer's memo largely is a statement of his political views as they apply to workplace policies. The memo is styled as a lament to Google's ideological echo chamber. California law prohibits employers from threatening to fire employees to get them to adopt or refrain from adopting a particular political course of action. Third, the engineer complained in parts of his memo about company policies that he believes violate employment discrimination laws. Those policies include support programs limited by race or gender, and promotional and hiring scoring policies that consider race and gender. It is unlawful for an employer to discipline an employee for challenging conduct that the employee reasonably believed to be discriminatory, even when a court later determines the conduct was not actually prohibited by the discrimination laws. In other words, the engineer doesn't have to be right that some of Google's diversity initiatives are unlawful, only that he reasonably believes that they are. Brianna Wu even chimed in. If you're unfamiliar with Brianna Wu, she's an aspiring congresswoman who is using Gamergate as a way to push herself into a political career. So anyway, she tweets out, "Great, Google took a stand for women and POC, showing that blatantly sexist and racist attitudes aren't tolerated. I would heavily encourage you to check out the memo that is in the description below and read through it and ask yourself, is this racist or sexist? Not in the slightest. He is very, very polite and professional throughout the entire thing, and he doesn't say anything regarding any hatred towards anybody. But of course, people had a problem with it. And then Brianna Wu tweeted out, as a reply to that last tweet, "For the next 24 hours, men are going to scream from the hills about this. This is not about you," in all caps. This is about the women at Google. Because only women can talk about issues that regard women. Sergey tweeted out to Brianna, "Have you actually read this? Have a hard time with sexist manifesto label, makes valid points and seems to care about culture and diversity." To which she replied to him, epically, "That's because you don't have the lived experience to understand structural sexism." Okay, but that's kind of a non-starter for any sort of productive conversation. You're shutting me out of your perspective. Bottom line is, sexist manifesto oversimplifies and probably hurts what was probably an honest effort to improve, including diversity approach. And then Brianna tweeted back, "Your perspective is uninformed by lived experience. You leaping into this and instructing women how to interpret it is obnoxious. And frankly, making this about you and your feelings is part of structural sexism." So she accused him of being sexist at the end. Nice little cherry on top. Well, that'll about do it for this video. Let me know what you all think about this in the comments below. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the subject, and I'll be back a little bit later today with a little something else to talk about. So yeah, I'll see you all later.